Welcome to the Independent Workforce, the podcast where we explore the now and the future of work through the lens of temporary employment such as freelancers, contractors, fractional experts, you name it. Here we speak with CEOs, recruiters, founders, and industry leaders about how they work with independent talent, the wins, the challenges, and the lessons learned. My name is Yurii. I'm growing the freelance market at freelancermap, an international platform that's been connecting top independent professionals with companies for over 20 years. And my guest is Rich Wilson, CEO and co-founder of Gigged.AI, the blended workforce platform for enterprises, who, with prior experience at Gartner and Allegis Group, is reshaping how enterprises tackle skill gaps using freelancers, internal talent, and AI. And who's also very, very passionate about mental health, AI, and the future of work. So welcome, Rich.
Thank you, Yurii. That was a good introduction. I like that.
Super happy to meet you. I listened to your conversation with Matt at Human Cloud. You've already shared a lot of insight there, and I really, really want to dive into all this nitty-gritty and get even more of your experience. So you worked at big companies like Allegis and Gartner, and now you're leading Gigged.AI. So what made you focus on freelancing and open talent? Like, what's your story with the independent market?
Yeah, absolutely. So I was a recruiter. So my first real job, I had various other jobs, but my first real job was as a recruiter, working for Allegis Group in 2006. So that was recruiting contractors into large companies. I'd done that for a short number of time, and then I quickly moved into the sales side and leadership side. But I spent 12 years. It wasn't called open talent then. We wouldn't have called it freelancers. We were really providing contractors on large digital transformation programs. Like Windows XP was the first one I worked on, right? So we had lots of contractors plugging in old computers. Then we obviously moved into the world of more digital transformation, so building software platforms, and then data and AI came later. But I was involved in the hiring of thousands and thousands and thousands of contractors. So I had the experience of I've actually recruited them, I've sold the service, I've developed different service lines within that. I spend a lot of time in statement of work, so really creating large scale statement of work programs where you could bring contractors under multiple deliverables. Done a lot of work on that. So yeah, my experience was really in it, working for a large recruitment firm, doing the day-to-day work. After 12 years, you mentioned burnout. I was really burnt out, and I decided that I wanted to take a bit of time out. I hadn't spent enough time with my family. I spent too much time building Allegis in the early days. So I took some time out. I learned more about data and AI. I took some board positions. I was then joined Gartner, where I worked with a lot of technology leaders, and I learned. And one of the things that came up a lot was around talent, open talent, internal talent, AI, everything. Most leaders, even though it was a technology advisory, everything came back to talent. It came back to people. So I had the idea for Gig probably 2018. At that time, Fiverr and Upwork were obviously starting to grow, and I had the idea, but I didn't have the physical or mental health to actually go and do what it takes to build a startup, because it's very difficult, as you know, building a startup. So, but I always had the idea that there was a way. I'm not a believer that we're trying to disrupt the old recruitment company and we're trying to change, but there is a change coming, and there is going to be a much bigger demand for open talent than we've ever seen before. I believe that. I think AI agents are obviously going to have an impact on that, but I think overall open talent is going to be a key pillar of the talent strategy for any enterprise. So, that's kind of where I came, right? So, I used to be, when I was 21, I'd be on the phone recruiting contractors, logging it on a very basic CRM, if there even was a CRM. This is before LinkedIn, and then obviously I've moved with the times, So I like to think I'm in a unique position to try and automate some of the tasks because I have done the tasks. I'm not a Silicon Valley guy who has an idea to automate. I have spent years on the phones to client, on the phone to contractors, manually doing the job, you know. So
Yeah.
I feel like I've got some experience actually in the trenches that you can
Yeah.
then bring into into the world of technology.
The funniest thing that you mentioned that some companies might think that all these platforms and all these AI technologies are removing recruiters. And I would say kind of yes for very, very low skilled tasks because like when you need to create a logo, you don't really need a recruiter for that. But for example, if we are talking about complex projects where you really like it's still building human connections, human relationships, and you still need people inside. So I feel like all what's going on in current workforce, all that is changing, is not removing recruiters from the equation. It's more like supercharging them with like the better tools to identify the best talents. And I'm also curious, so what types of companies do you work with at Gigged.AI and what are they looking for when they come to you?
Okay, so let me answer both questions. I'll touch on your point about recruiters first. If you think about the recruiter role historically, you had what you would call either a 180 recruiter or a 360 recruiter. Now, a 180 recruiter would just recruit. They would they would get the requirements and they would find the contractor to fill that requirement. Then you have the 360 recruiter. They go out, they sell, they try and work on the find new customers, and then they will then have to recruit. Now, it's a very stressful job. Both jobs are very stressful. But if you think about where I see that job changing because of AI, that recruiter role is becoming much more customer success. Their job is to manage relationships, deal with issues, be able because issues still happen, right? A platform doesn't stop problems happening. It also, also sometimes you can see things that technology doesn't see. And so I think that role of a recruiter is less of a recruiter about finding sourcing. It's more about actually being the linchpin of the relationship. And
Yeah.
then those 360 recruiters can spend more time on sales because right now, if you're a recruitment company, you're a platform, whatever way, adding new customers and selling is really, really tough. It's a very crowded market. Everybody's trying to win new business. Most recruitment companies are down 10 to 20% year on year, so they are fighting for their lives to win new business. So sales becomes more important than ever. So I think that's how I see the roles evolving because of AI. The good sellers can sell more, the good recruiters can spend more on relationship management and less on sourcing.
Yeah.
In terms of our client base, so our client base has changed. When we first started the company, I don't think we had a clear idea of who the client was. So we pretty much work with everybody, startups, any big company, scale, anybody we could get a gig from, we would do.
Hmm.
In 2024, I made the decision to pivot to enterprise for a couple of reasons. A, we've seen that to really make a business work in the platform space, you need volume, which Fiverr and Upwork, TopTal, those platforms have volume built over a long time. A lot of smaller gigs, especially in Upwork and Fiverr space, but there's volume of gigs. Now, we're a small company, we're headquartered in
Yeah.
Scotland, we're trying to go globally. We cannot compete on that scale. But where we could compete is focus on having higher quality gigs, much higher price gigs, focus on filling less gigs but filling a much higher gig value. And we realized to do that, we need to do enterprise. Now, I spent my whole career within enterprise,
Hmm.
but selling a platform into enterprise is really tough. It's really, really tough. Now, we have figured out how to do it, but it's tough. And so, what we decided to do, Yurii, was we really narrowed down our ICP. And we went, right, we're going to focus on CIOs and CTOs. We're not going to sell to HR and TA initially, not because we don't want to, but we found that the CIO and CTO have a lot of pain around getting talent. Now, we provide technology talent, data engineers, data scientists, software developers. So, and we decided to go, look, and we're only going to work with companies from about 100 million revenue to about 10 billion. Now, there's a few, there's a few under that and there's a few over that, and we're going to focus on manufacturing, financial services, and professional services as the main industries. And so we now have 20 active enterprises from those industries using the platform. So, it was very tough to get that enterprise adoption. But once you get it, it's obviously you don't need to have as many customers. So our view very much is let's have a smaller amount of enterprises that do a lot more with us and then do it that way. But that was a really difficult decision. It was a really unpopular decision that I made at the time. My team thought I was crazy. My investors thought I was crazy. I think a lot of people thought we were crazy, and I can understand why. But I said if a business that needs to be scalable needs to have clients that can continue to have repeat business. So we also seen that enterprises were reducing their full-time headcount. The contractor programs were getting less spend, but they were spending more money through SOW, and especially with large, expensive consulting firms. So we thought, well, instead of competing with the platforms and competing with recruitment companies, why don't we compete more with the big, expensive professional services firms who we sometimes partner with as well? So it's a strange relationship. But by doing that, we're able to tap into a network which has high demand for the skill sets that we need. So yeah, very much in that enterprise, and we won't change that. We're now very much trying to become an enterprise solution. That is where we're trying to play, and that's what we're going to focus on. So it will see less gigs. We won't have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of gigs open at any one time, but the gigs we do have will be high value, high quality.
How do you get through to CIOs and CTOs? I mean, like, when you meet them, what are their pain points? Why should they care about working with contingent workforce, about hiring freelancers and independent talents, instead of just going, spending money on an expensive consultancy firm, or instead of just going and hiring some full-time people? Why should they care? Like, how do you go through that to them?
Yeah. So it's a common, there's a common theme within technology leaders, is that most are having to deliver more with less. That's a common theme. And when I say more with less, more are having to deliver data and AI transformation now at scale. But their full-time hiring budgets in most cases, not all, but in most, have been reduced. So that OPEX, operating expenditure, is being reduced. Now that CAPEX is being increased. However, there are plenty of times when you should be using an advisory or a professional services firm. However, if you're doing long tail delivery work, so the strategy's been defined, but you're now needing execution, you're now needing to build product quickly, and you've decided to do that with yourself, or you're trying to do pilots quickly, outsourcing it or giving it to professional services is hugely, hugely expensive. So if your full-time headcount is reducing, your project spend is increasing, well, what's the best way to get the most bang for your buck? It's to be able to cut down some of those £2,000, £3,000, £4,000 a day rates by being able to tap into different talent pools who can have the same or higher quality level, but you're not having to pay a ridiculous margin. Yeah. And that really is the benefit. It's been able to get access to talent quickly, but without having to pay a premium. Because if you're having to pay a premium, that adds up pretty quickly. If you've got 50 consultants on an average of $2,000 or pounds or euros a day, if you can reduce that by 30%, that's a lot of extra budget you've got to spend on other projects. So it's not like it's an unlimited well of money, even though that budget has largely increased. So it is all about, I need to deliver more with less. I need access to the talent. I don't have time to do bureaucracy around how do I hire a contractor, but also hiring an expensive consultancy isn't always the answer. So that's where we kind of come in as an alternative solution. And we always try and be the and, right? So what we very much are, we're not the or, right? It's not like, hey, you've got contractor agencies, you've got your consultancies, and you've got your platform, and you can use one. That's not the best way to do it. The best way is to go, right, for the solution, we need a data scientist to come in for a very specific piece of work. If I use that Gigged.AI, I can get someone at £700 a day. I can have flexibility. I can get it done. If I do it through a consultancy, it's 2,000 a day. I don't really have everything I need. If I do it through a contractor model, it may take too long. So in this scenario, that Gigged.AI model is the best model. But there's times, hey, I'm trying to build a £10 million digital transformation. That's not going to be built with us solely. You're going to use a large professional services firm or integrator to do that. Makes sense. So it's just being able to be there as the option when the problem presents itself.
Yeah. And what about safety? I mean, like, for example, when you hire the company, consulting company, you pay a bigger margin, but you kind of have the name behind, and you think it's not always the case, but at least you think that everything will go right and you will get your project and everything will be okay. It's not always the case. Sometimes it happens. But what is the difference? Like, why should companies go and work with independent talents whom they maybe not even trust in? Like, how to deal with this trust gap?
Yeah. I think the trust gap is mental than reality, right? So, you know, if you're hiring someone from a professional services firm, the chances are that they may be a full-time employee, but the chances are they're not a full-time employee. They're a contractor from somewhere else, right? So you are bringing in independent talent. You just don't know it because it's rebadged. So I think that whole trust thing, it's kind of quite an old school mentality. Hey, nobody's ever been sacked for using IBM. Kind of that old mentality. So yeah, I think just because you're the brand name of the company doesn't mean the quality of the resource is going to be any higher. These companies are under a lot of pressure. They've got a lot of junior talent that they're having to use instead of their senior talent because they've had to let them go because they're on high salaries. So I do think I understand that there's a brand name and a kudos allowed to it, sure. But the reality is that the quality of resource has been proven not to be any better. So why would you pay a premium for a resource that isn't going to be of high quality? I think that's how I look at it. Now, some people, I can't change their mind on that, and that's okay. But a lot of the time, once we're in and we're able to show it, we can, like, one of the big four, well, I won't mention who it is, but one of our clients have replaced us instead of using a big four consultancy for all their data analysis because they were just paying a lot of money, paying a lot of premium, and they actually realised we can get high quality people from Gigged.AI at a fraction of the cost, and it makes sense. So they've replaced us as the supplier of choice within that team. So I said it's not always the case. Like we work with some of these large professional services firms. There's still a time and a place for sure.
Yeah.
But I do think there's now a time and a place to tap into independent talent because the quality is there. We've got people on our platform that are ex-Google, ex-McKinsey, great resource, great people who've just decided to work a different way. Just because they've worked a different way doesn't mean they should be penalised and not be able to find work in that company. And also, if you're hiring and you're like, hey, like I can access this ex-McKinsey guy for this project, at a price less point than McKinsey, and the consultants getting paid for like double what they were getting paid in a full. It's a win-win, right? So
Yeah.
I said, doesn't work it's not a one-size-fits-all, but it's an alternative model for delivering projects.
This episode of The Independent Workforce is brought to you by Freelancer Map, the home of freelancing. Whether you are looking to hire top freelance talent fast or a freelancer ready to find your next big project, Freelancer Map connects the right people with the right work. No endless job boards, no guesswork, just direct access to verified experts and opportunities across the globe. Visit freelancermap.com and start building your next success story today. By the way, to your point, I see more and more talents that are getting experience in such companies as McKinsey, etc., or if we're talking about developer like Google, Microsoft, and so on. And then they are getting their experience, and then they are moving to like create other projects, and they basically have some basics already. And to a point, you go to them, you have pretty much similar experience if you were going to a company itself, and still you receive like much higher rate and like one-to-one human-to-human connection. I feel like it's also works a little bit faster than while you are having all this hundreds of conversations with like sales representative, with like customer success, with someone else, and then on the like third or fourth person is someone who you are really talking to and dealing with. And to a point of getting into the company. So like as you've said, to come into enterprise, it's a little harder in the beginning than, for example, coming to startups. But then when you just inside, you work, they post a lot of projects, they do a lot of things. And when companies are thinking about hiring independent talents, freelancers, you name it, what are the most common worries or questions they ask you about?
So payments comes up a lot, right? Payments is a big one. IP is a big one as well. Who owns the IP? And also just around the speed of the opportunity. You know, how many people are going to be involved in a proposal? You know, what's my chances of being successful? Because there is obviously a lot of people out of work. You know, that freelancer market is growing, especially in the UK, because of people being made redundant in their full-time jobs. So you've decided, so you've then got a swell of people who weren't freelancers before. And they're obviously used to security and they're used to a certain level of pay. And that's obviously a massive uncertainty going from that into freelancing if you've never done it before. So yeah, they would be the main things. I would say your payment frequency, your quickness of payment. That's where we get asked the most. I think people want to get paid for their work, right? And our job is to make sure they get paid for their work. So yeah, that would be the main one. We also get, you know, like I like, how do I have more opportunities? You know, why isn't there hundreds of different gigs on your platform? Our view always is like we're just not a high volume solution. We're not ever going to be that. So just because there's more gigs doesn't mean you're going to have a better chance. We're going to match you to a gig that you're going to fit your opportunity. And if it don't, we won't match you to it. So yeah, I would say they're the main topics.
How do you comfort them? I mean, like, what makes them change their fixed mindset and work with freelancers?
A lot of the time you don't use the term, by removing the word freelancer, you can you could you can get them thinking differently. Freelancer has a bit of a connotation around it, especially in the UK and even in the US market. You know, contractor, consultant, you know, there's different terms, but the bottom line is a freelancer is historically seen as a different sort of role, right? And it's not, they're all the same thing. But they're seen as, but I think if you use the term, hey, this is an independent consultant that's coming in and do a very specific piece of work, again, it's elevated. It shouldn't be elevated because it's the same thing. But I do think that the term freelancer, you know, we don't use the term freelancer marketplace. We don't use that terminology because enterprises don't want to or don't think that that's a model for them. We use contractor or consultant. That's the terminology we use. Like I said, same thing. But again, by saying that we will create a statement of work and we will match a consultant or contractor to that statement of work, again, it's exactly the same as matching a freelancer to a brief. It's the same thing. Terminology is different, and the enterprise terminology and positioning is everything. So you need to position it differently. Even though, yes, it is a freelancer working on a project brief, of course it is. But again, that terminology doesn't work in enterprise. So I think a lot of it is around, and we've spent a lot of time on the positioning of it. Not positioning it as a talent platform. Not really. We don't really position it that way. We position it as a solution to help get work done. And even, yeah, of course, are we a freelancer? Could you say we're a freelancer marketplace? Would we sit in that category? Yeah, we would sit in that category. But that's not a category that enterprise really understands or focuses on. So if you want to sell into that category, you need to find a different way to do it. So that's what we try and do. We've learned a lot of this by failure, right? So I don't pretend to have all the answers. We tried different things and some worked and some didn't. And some things have failed spectacularly and we've learned from it. But this has just came from trial and error, right? And trying to figure out what works. When I look at our initial offering and now, it's not even the same company.
I feel like it's also very important point that you just mentioned about finding the right wording, because sometimes I have this experience and I'm talking to people and I'm explaining them about freelancers, how it's amazing to work with them, etc. And they're like, no, we don't work with freelancers. We keep on conversation and then they're like, you mean contractors? Yes, of course, we work with contractors. So I feel like it's also one of the blockers of the market, international market, that different companies, different people use different terminology, like freelancers, contractors, contingent workforce, external talent, whatever. There are so many words, and it's always like a question of finding like what is the word, the best wording.
And the
Also,
reason
you
the
talk a
reason
lot
for
about the
that,
blended. Yeah, yeah.
sorry, Yuri. The reason for that though, just to touch on it, and it's not just the terminology, it's because they come out of a different budget. A freelancer would tend to come out more of a temp budget, which most companies don't have. A contractor would tend to come out of a contingent worker spend budget. And then a consultant would come out of a statement of work services. They're very different spend categories in an enterprise. So if you're trying to sell something and they can't categorize it because they know they're going to need to go off a sign-off process, then they're not going to do it. So it's understanding, like, if you mention this word, they're going to think about it in that budget. And if they think that budget is easier to get, because at the end of the day, if you're an enterprise, you need to get things done quickly. You need to cut through bureaucracy as quickly as possible. So if it is that, that's why the terminology is so important. It's not about so they can just call it something different. It's so they know how they can get budget for it and get it through procurement and get it signed off. And that's not easy. So that's a big thing. So that's where it comes from. So sorry I interrupted you. You were saying about the blended.
No, you added an amazing point, and I feel like when you help people and when you speak the same language with them, you make it easier for them to make a decision, because exactly they already, like, the moment you mention one word, as you said, they go exactly to the different categories and they think, no, it's hard, I won't do this. Or maybe they, it's easy, yeah, I will do this. So from your experience, maybe do you have some kind of a dictionary of like words to use when talking to enterprises? Like, I don't know, maybe you have some guidelines of how to go to them. Like, what's your internal process when you talk to enterprises?
I think I just seek to understand, I think all are different. So I think some use different terminology and different budgets. I don't think it's as easy as a one size fits all. So I think that you need to be able to try and understand when you're doing the discovery, and then you can position it in a way which will align it. One of our big learns initially, we were asked to work with some big companies, and then they said, yeah, cool, we're just going to set you up through our MSP. And I talked to the MSPs and there was no issue, but the problem being MSP weren't used to working with a platform. So we couldn't have any sort of technology integration. So they wanted us just to send CVs manually to a job requisition. Now, we're not going to do that. We don't have the resource to do it. We don't have the functionality to do it. We're not going to do that. However, we then said to them, look, we would come through SOW. And they're, yeah, you don't need to walk through us. You walk through this route. Because they didn't actually want the business when we understood. So I think there is a real seek to understand and then understand how how they buy. I'm a big believer of trying to reduce the barriers to entry and try and make it simple, try and make it easy to buy from you. And because enterprise procurement is difficult, and that's just the case across every company. It's hard to deal with large companies. Just is. It always has been. It always will be, because they've got regulation, they've got budgets, they've got process, because they need to be. They're big multi-billion-dollar companies, so they need to have process. So I think it's trying to understand that process as well as you can, and then using the right terminology and not trying to force terminology down their throat. I think that's the best way that I've found to do
If you could build the perfect setup for companies to work with external talent, contractors, freelancers, you name it, what would it look like?
So this kind of comes to what we're trying to build within the blended talent side of things. So our ultimate vision is to be the blended talent platform for enterprise. So to be able to match an enterprise demand to different supply. So that could be an internal employee sitting on the bench. That could be an external contractor, freelancer, consultant. It could be an AI agent that they've built or someone else has built. And that's the ultimate, one kind of orchestration platform which is able to tap into different places. Now, the issue is that you need lots of different integrations. So you need to integrate Workday. You would need to integrate with their ATS potentially. You would need to integrate probably with a VMS. Potentially, you would need to then integrate with Azure, and we've kind of ticked about half of them, right? So we've now integrated with Microsoft, OpenAI, Workday, and a few others. We don't have the whole ecosystem mapped out yet, though, because it's very expensive. I think ideally, that's where we go. There is one platform which is the place where you create the demand and create the matching, but that is talking to all of the other solutions that are in place. I think that ideally is where it goes. Now, that is hugely difficult to do in an enterprise because there's so many different platforms, there's so many different teams, there's so many different geographies, processes. It's very difficult to do at this point. But I do think there are areas, if you chunk it down and bring it down to specific departments, you can do it. I think if you're trying to do it across a whole org, it's really difficult. But if you say, right, we're going to take the data team and we're going to take the data team only, and we're going to build a POC which be able to match any demand to internal resource, whether that be a contractor or full-time, whether it be an AI agent or whether it be external resource, and we're going to work on now that functionality exists. We have that functionality right now. And I think doing a POC with a specific team is how you do it. And then you can start to look. I think trying to do it across a whole organization and trying to do workforce transformation across every single department is just going to fail. And I think loads of companies have tried it. I think wholesale org change just doesn't work. But if you can do it in the teams where the most friction exists, then that's maybe how you get towards the total talent utopia. But if you're trying to do it across every single department, it's just like if you're trying to bring in salespeople and you're trying to bring in data people, it's totally different. It's not even the same in any way. The suppliers are different, the personalities are different, the skills are different, everyone's different.
Yeah.
Can't have a one size fits all, but I think where this friction exists, and I do think data, AI, and cyber is where there's huge skill shortages within teams. So how do you kind of deal with that overutilization and underutilization? That's where we're trying to attack it.
I feel like the future is inevitable of the blended workforce where internal, external, and AI, all the things are working together in a specific way. I have no idea what exact way, but in specific. I recently read the book, The Future of Work, of one of our previous guests, Yurii Lopez. And it's very interesting.
I've got it. I've read it.
Read it. There are so many amazing examples. And once again, you can read it like a fiction book and maybe like some ideas and thoughts, but they are not that fiction, like when I watched Black Mirror, I don't know, like 6 years ago, so it was kind of a fiction. Now I see many of those things from the Black Mirror is coming to our life, and it's a little bit of a scary. So I'm curious, from your experience, how close are enterprises at the moment to reach the level of like really, really good working blended workforce?
There's some doing it, right? So it definitely, I think in Nuri's book, there's some great examples. John Winslow's book, there's some great examples. There was a book from guys from Mercer um, and Standard Chartered Skills Powered Organisation. That was called. That was a really good book. There was the blended workforce book as well by Rochelle. So there's different. There's obviously books out there that get some great examples. So there are companies doing it. There are examples that exist. We're doing it at a small scale with some companies right now, but it is very difficult to do the way that I try and describe it. The technology to do all of this exists. It's not a technology issue. We've built the technology engine to do it. Others have built technology engines to do it. The technology is there. The issue is change management. The
Yeah.
issue is being able to change hearts and minds and change processes within an organization which has got a lot of work to do and under a lot of pressure and having to do more with less. And when you're running 100 miles an hour and you've just been asked to run 110 miles an hour, it's very difficult to look back and go, right, actually, how do I stop running for a bit and actually think about the best way to do this? Because I'm just running. I'm just trying to run faster and faster and faster and faster. And at one point, I'm going to fall. But I'm not able to think that way because I'm just running. And I think that's where the organizational change bit comes in, because you need to say to everybody, stop. Let's just think, are we running in the right direction here? Or are we running in the wrong direction? Because if we're running in the wrong direction, running faster means we're going to get to the wrong destination quicker. And I think that's the way that I try and think about when we get asked, when we're doing a POC, we're like, hey, what do you need from us? We always get asked that. And they always think it's going to be a technology integration, but it's not. I always say, I need a senior owner on this POC. I need a change manager. I need someone that's got some seniority and can work across departments to unlock friction, that can make decisions and is empowered to make decisions. Because like when you're putting in, you need to decide a taxonomy. You need to decide what integrations you're going to have. These decisions need to be made. Now, none of these decisions are one-way door. They can all be reversed. But the decision needs to be made by someone. So I always say to them, I need someone to own this and to push it forward. And if I have that, the chances are this will be a success. But technology alone will not be a success, because technology without successful adoption doesn't work. So again, it goes back to, and this is why I don't think we're going to get rid of every single person anytime soon. You still need people to make things happen. I don't believe an AI agent can do change management properly. I don't think it can do hearts and minds. I don't think it can get people to change fundamentally their behavior. And that's where I think the blockers come. Like I always think even with a Gen AI tool, if you think about, if you put a new tool in any organization or even personally, you could use it for like 2 or 3 days. And you're like, oh, this is really cool. But see if it hasn't actually done something for you. You'll forget about it because you've got a lot in your brain and you forget about it. But whereas if that tool was actually fundamentally got into your operating rhythm and into your psyche, you'll keep using it because it adds value, and you kind of like, yeah, this is my habit now. My habit is to use this product or use this technology. But if you don't create that adoption, then it won't get used. So again, this is old. None of this is new, right? None of this stuff is new, but it's more important than ever.
Dealing with habits, replacing habits, and making some changes. People are afraid of changes, and it's very, very hard to really make them do something. So, from your experience and from your perspective, what is one small step to take right away to ensure that those changes are coming, to implement those changes within your mindset? And who needs to take this step?
Good question. Like I think it comes back to if you've got a team of people, I think it's understanding what skills you have just now and what skills you need. I think it's as simple as being able to, whether it's technology or whatever, but being able to know, hey, here's the current skill inventory that I have in my team, and here is the capability that I don't have that I'm going to need. That way you can then make some decisions on, hey, I need open talent models, I need maybe internal talent models, but then you can really know and see like, oh, actually, I talked to a customer last night and they're like, yeah, look, I've just had a request for 10 ServiceNow developers. I don't need 10 ServiceNow developers. We don't budget for 10 ServiceNow developers. So I need to understand very quickly who has ServiceNow capability within our organization that can help with this problem, because I cannot hire people with that skill because I don't have the budget to do it. And I might not have the demand long term. So what they're now going to do is they're looking internally, and then they've realised that, hey, there's a few people with the skill, but they don't. So they've then went out and they're going to hire some contract resource to them. So they're going to supplement it. But the request initially was, within the business, you need to go and hire 10 full-time service now. I mean, you step back and go, well, wait a minute. Do we have that resource? Do we actually need that resource? How long do we need that resource for? So I think it comes down to the delivery managers, the hiring managers, to be able to, be able to push back and be able to have a very quick mechanism to be able to understand how they understand what they've got and what they don't have.
I feel like that's exactly why we see all those many layoffs here and there, because people overhired. They thought they needed more people, and then like, technology is coming, things are coming. Like we don't need all those people. So they are kind of like trying to understand, reevaluate what's happening, and then we see so many layoffs. But who knows? Rich, I wish to have the sky as the limit. I still have so many questions for you, but time is the limit. So the final question: what advice would you give to two categories? First, companies starting to use contractors, freelancers, consultants, whatever you name it, and to freelancers, contractors, consultants entering this market?
So for the companies, yeah, I would say just have an open mind to having different supply models. I said that having a list of recruitment agencies and then just a list of service integrators and then just doing it that way is like 2008. Yeah, it doesn't need to be that way anymore. You can have a good supplier network that link into different categories that do different things. It doesn't need to be as linear as it used to be. And I think having an open mind to that, as I said, I think there's crowdsourcing platforms. You could have one or two of them. You could have one or two SOW platforms like ourselves. You could have your systems integrators. You can have some recruitment agencies, but it doesn't need to be just those two categories that we've traditionally been programmed to use, historically. And then I think as a freelancer, contractor, consultant, I think the biggest thing for me would be around building your brand, building your personal brand, using LinkedIn, using different ways to be talking about the project successes. I think one thing a lot of people, open talent, don't do very well is they don't, like, if I've just delivered a project for someone and I've delivered these outcomes, like, that's a great post. Hey, I've just delivered these three outcomes for this enterprise. Maybe you can say who it is, maybe you can't, but it doesn't really matter. You can say, hey, I've just rolled off a financial services organization and I did, the outcomes I achieved was this. Being able to explain the value that you're adding to organizations and regularly sharing those stories is so important. And I think there's this view, a lot of people, especially as they join, they become an independent worker or a freelancer, they stay more quiet than ever. They think they need to go under the radar, where it's the opposite. They need to build that brand. You're now an entrepreneur. You now have your own company. Your job is now to land business.
Yeah.
So as well as being a data analyst or a software developer, you now need to develop sales skills. Scary for a lot of people. The best way to win work is through word of mouth. It's through building your brand. It's through building that. So, every time that you finish, the hiring manager, ask them for a one paragraph post that on LinkedIn, right? Then ask them, is there anybody else you think I should be talking to? So I said, I know these things sound really simple, but they're really, really effective. So yeah, that would be what my advice for sure.
Yeah, I feel like that's what people are missing, especially who are like great experts who just start on their individual journey, that they forgetting about the business part. They remember about freelance part, but the business they are missing. So they think that they still will go and do all the stuff, and then they don't think about sales, marketing, personal brand, reaching out, contracting, etc. And yeah, to a point, there are so many hats. And last but not least, name two people I should reach out to talk about the independent workforce.
Oh, no, that's a good one. You're obviously talking, a lot of the names I would mention, I know you're already talking to. You obviously mentioned you mentioned John Younger, you mentioned Matt Matola, you mentioned John Windsor. Other names, Connor Heaney from CXC, definitely. Again, Connor's got a podcast. He speaks a lot of sense. The other one that a lot of people won't know but is a really interesting leader in this space is Gavin McClafferty from Subsea 7. He's worked with Steve Radar in the past with certain things, but again, he's someone who's really leading open innovation and is a real thought leader in this space. Maybe not as well known as John Windsor or John Younger, but again, a really knowledgeable guy on that. So those two would be really interesting conversations.
Got it, Rich. Thank you so much. And how to connect with you?
Mainly LinkedIn. I'll be honest. I'm always on LinkedIn. LinkedIn is my favorite tool. So yeah, just connect with me on LinkedIn. Drop me a message. I'll reply eventually.
Rich, thank you so much for, first of all, sharing your knowledge so openly. I was very interested in what you've shared with Matt Mottola at Human Cloud. I just love that conversation. I learned already so many things from you at this moment, especially when you were talking about like how different wordings starts different processes in minds of decision maker. Like, wow, for me, it was like, really? Okay, let's talk about it more. So thank you so much for being here, and also from my personal side, thank you so much for
No,
investing
no,
your time and passion into growing this independent workforce. So yeah, thank you for this conversation.
no, thank you.
And for listeners, thank you for joining us on this episode of the Independent Workforce. I hope you've taken one step closer to working smarter with freelance talent. If you enjoyed this conversation, subscribe to learn even more and share it with your colleague. And remember, the future of work is now.